What's up, Meta Nerds? This video is all about the new trooper variants we saw in the Solo movie, the Swamp Trooper, and the Range Troopers. Starting with the forces we saw on Mimban, let's take a look at the Swamp Trooper. These units were separate from the Stormtrooper Corps, and usually made up veterans of the Planetary Defense Forces that rose up to fight the invading CIS during the time of the Clone Wars. After the declaration of the New Order, Palpatine started to phase out clones for Stormtroopers, who were usually civilians that were motivated to join due to a combination of financial and patriotic reasons. These new recruits were almost exclusively human, and were intended to become the face of the Empire, but Palpatine had to find a way to get rid of all of the Clone Wars holdovers, not just the clones themselves, but all of the local militia allies that popped up as well. By throwing all of these veterans into the most deadly areas, Palpatine implemented an amazing transitional strategy in which he could pacify the more rebellious systems, while simultaneously eliminating soldiers that were not raised with a personal alliance to the Emperor. As these Clone Wars holdovers were killed off, eventually the Mudtroopers would receive transfers of failed cadets from all the other branches of the Imperial military, with the overall feeling being that they already wasted tons of credits on their training, so the Empire might as well recoup some cost by throwing them against the Mimbanese. If we look into the backgrounds of just those in the squad with Solo, we see that 3 of them were transferred due to behavioral issues. One was from an Outer Rim planet devastated by the Clone Wars, and one of them joined with hopes of just finishing his service so that he could receive a military scholarship. They were also accompanied by battlefield medics, who could be executed as traitors if they were ever caught trying to provide medical aid to non-humans. As for their equipment, they had high-impact blastoid shields, goggles, and respirator mask with breathing tubes, these last 2 being especially necessary when fighting on Mimban, not just because of all the mud flying around, but also because the air was known to contain airborne fungal spores that like to settle down and grow inside of human lungs. The standard issue weapon was the E-10, a more rugged version of the E-11 used by Stormtroopers, but other blasters included the E-22, EC-17, and a large rotary machine blaster, reminiscent of the Z-6 used by clone troopers. Many Imperial Swamp Troopers would carry extra Tabana gas magazines over their chests, and this armor actually looks a lot like what we see worn by AT-AT pilots, of course worn best by General Veers. This red bicep armor is an accent we see in Shore Troopers, while the medics had these painted red and white. The medics' gear included normal items like bandages and scissors, but they also had what's called an antiseptic field generator, which could repel all microorganisms from a wound, as well as an easy-to-apply pain-relieving gas mask. But throughout the ranks and specializations, every trooper on Mimban had thick capes, which were waterproof and helped to keep the mud out of areas between the plates and the undersuit, but which also helped keep the soldier warm during the cold, damp nights. Now moving to the other side of the spectrum, we have the Range Troopers. Where the Mudtroopers were full of rejects, and those that the Empire wanted to kill off, the Range Troopers were elite soldiers that had worked their whole Imperial career in order to make it into this corps. All Range Troopers went through excruciating training and had to show exceptional battlefield skills, along with the ability to hunt, collect resources, and deal with locals, so that they could survive for months in the wild and on a wide array of different planets. This required them to be more than just brave warriors, but they also had to be experts on wildlife, geography, and geology, along with an understanding of the history of the locals, all over dozens of different worlds throughout the Empire. Some of this ruggedness is reflected in their armor, with helmets that were bulkier and fitted with more simplified parts, so that they could be easily repaired in the field, along with a specialized E-10 that had infrared scopes and other targeting data. Of course not worn on every planet. When they were stationed at Vandor, they were covered in synth fur blends that were excellent for heat retention and blocking cold winds, along with special vambrace armor that allowed the trooper to control these magnetomic gription boots. The Empire needed to protect their shipments of coaxium, so they trusted their elite range troopers, to whom being stationed upon a 90 km/h moving train was just another assignment. So that's it for these 2 troopers, but you definitely want to hear these cool facts and behind the scenes stuff. On the few occasions that they were around other Imperials, it is said that range troopers often enjoyed intimidating stormtroopers who they deemed as soft. And with Beckett's uniform, we can see that officers had a fitted greatcoat, and wear a regular cap instead of a helmet. But what is perhaps one of the coolest behind the scenes facts I've covered in a while is in this clip from the episode Recruits, from Season 1, Episode 5 of the Clone Wars TV show. This shows just how long the Mimbanese had been fighting, that 12 years later, Solo would just find himself in the newest Imperial wave of Mudtroopers. And I was surprised that I didn't see any conversation about this online already, but I think that their helmets were clearly designed after Kylo Ren's, but I have no clue what the connection would be, or why there even would be one. So that's it for the Imperial Swamp Trooper, also known as the Mud Trooper, and the elite forces of the Range Troopers. But most important of all, remember, eventually, every throwaway line in Star Wars will have its own subplot in a movie, and the Force will be with you. Always.